Hello, everybody. Guess what? We are now at episode 30. I never thought, well, I knew we'd get here, but I didn't know when. And I'm very excited about that. These are 30 episodes of interviews and discussions and very frank conversations, sometimes some mild debates about the whole process of how you actually grow a company. Not about how you start the company. There's a lot on that, but there's much less on how you actually take companies and grow them to scale, which they hire people, they create wealth, they have lots of customers, they create value of all kinds. And that's what Scale Up Podcast is all about. So I'm particularly excited to be here with Sahar Hashemi from the UK, who's a serial entrepreneur. She actually wears several hats. She's not wearing a hat right now. You can't see her, but she wears several hats. And the most recent hat, she's a writer, she's a speaker, she's a promoter of entrepreneurship in various ways. But her background is as an entrepreneur. She's created 2 significant ventures in the UK. We're going to get into that and try to, together with Sahar, we're going to mine her experience for some lessons learned. So Sahar, just say hi.
Hi, Dan. I'm so thrilled to be here.
Yeah, it's exciting to have you. We've actually crossed paths, not personally, but sort of, what's the right word, intellectually or professionally, in some of the work that you've done on Scale Up UK, which is a project that's a plug. Everyone should, if you don't know what Scale Up UK is, Google it, because it's really an exciting project. And so,
And I've heard about you, as I said, very much about the work you did at Babson. You were a legend when I first started researching scale-ups.
Okay, you can't see me blush, but I'm blushing. So I'm going to start off with a question that I ask just about everybody. It's a little bit of a curveball, but don't say anything about skinny candy. Don't say anything about entrepreneurship. Don't say anything about Coffee Republic. We'll get to those. Tell us something, in particular, something that may not be on your profile, who you are as a person.
Oh my God. Who I am as a person? I suppose I'm someone that has learned, finally have found my niche and just the one small area that I could align who I am with what I do. I started my life as a lawyer. And coming from an immigrant family, it was very much like you had to be a lawyer, a doctor, an accountant. And it just, when I started as a lawyer and I qualified, it was quite disappointing that I wasn't a great lawyer and it wasn't playing to my strengths. So I am that person who's, I suppose, grateful that I found an area where, I can be good at, where it sort of plays to my strengths.
And you
Yeah.
came to the UK when you were almost
12.
a teenager, right? 12 years old from Iran, as if I understand correctly. So I can only assume that impacted you and your viewpoint, both the experience of growing up in another culture, but also immigrating as a youngster.
Yes, I mean, my parents used to always say you have to be 10% better than the best because, you don't kind of originate from here. So, so very much that. But I'm also constantly grateful that I live in this country and have had so many opportunities that the UK has given me as a woman.
So looking back on it, was that a good thing to be pressured or pushed in a way to be 10% better? Or was that a bad thing, or a little bit of both?
Oh, I think it's the best gift your parents can give you, right? Is that gift of pushing yourself and self-belief. Because then I've sort of come to realize that, people talk about people who are confident or who have self-belief, but I kind of think self-belief is evidence-based because the first person you got to prove to yourself is yourself that you can do it. So that the more I think you're pushed in childhood to do something and then accomplish it, the more you're building that little bank account of self-belief that I think serves you later in life. So it's the biggest gift a parent can give a child, I think, to really get them to do stuff whereby they've sort of banked it. Oh, I said I'd do that. I might have failed, but I did that. Tick. And I suppose that's where, there's a lot of myths around what entrepreneurs have and persistence. But I think I got that from childhood by doing stuff, getting rejected, getting up again, just learning that and just believing in myself, I think.
And in
Maybe.
part because your parents believed you could be better in a way. And
Yeah.
it's interesting because that runs against some of the conventional parenting wisdom in the States anywhere. It says, you don't want to make your kids neurotic. You don't want to give them a bad self-concept by failing and so on. I happen to agree with you,
Yeah.
but I do feel that there is a kind of a zeitgeist of parenting out there not to be that way and not to have high expectations.
And then I think the distinction is I don't have children of my own, but I've seen around me what happens, especially, and I'm sure it's like that very much in the US as well. It's, parents might have their own impression of where they want their children to be. That's very different where, you kind of want your child to be at a certain school or a certain university. Awful thing to say, but, to make you look good. Whereas I think what was amazing about my parents, they were like, be who you are. Let's just see where you're going to be great at with a very open mind rather than fixated that, for my own ego, I want my child to get here. And I think that's different. And I think there is a huge amount of pressure. I can see that with all this sort of tutoring that goes on for people see their children's accomplishment as their own in a way.
It's
And
interesting because I think about
yeah,
kids, and I think I've five, including my stepdaughter, and I think
amazing.
they're wonderful people. And I keep thinking, why whenever I meet my friends in the United States, what do your kids do? Well, this one's a lawyer, this one's a this one's a that. And I think to myself, I could tell you what my kids do, but I'm more proud of who they are.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly. And I think there's been a lot of attachment to those sort of little, ticking boxes, and that's the biggest disservice you can do to someone because we're all so different. And I think in life, as long as we live, our best life for what we've got, using our reservoir of talent, that's and should be our life mission, right? Just to make sure we've used every ounce of what we were born with.
so let's fast forward now to Coffee Republic and Skinny Candy. So, the foundation story of Coffee Republic, I've heard you speak about it. It was sort of an against the odds kind of, really grit to get it started. And I don't want to really focus on the starting, the origin story as much as, so you get this going, you have a few stores, it's working, people are buying it, it's filling a need. And then you end up with 100 stores. So talk about the journey from a few stores to 100 stores. What did you get really right, and what did you get really wrong?
It was interesting because, as I sort of say at the beginning, we started, not, I didn't think I was an entrepreneur. I was just a customer, right? So I just started the business as a frustrated customer. My other half, my brother, my co-founder, had been to business school. So he had more sort of business ambition and stuff and how to do it. But for me, it was just a frustrated customer. I wanted to drink a latte wherever I was near my house, when went away, when I traveled around London. So we started very much in this very clueless, very startup-y way. So, I would say at the beginning, we were almost working from home. Both of us had moved back from, being a lawyer and a banker. We'd moved back to live with my mom. And the people we attracted were very much those sort of people that fit into entrepreneurial culture. They were also frustrated customers. They didn't have great CVs. They didn't have experience. We had very little money. We just got a little bank loan. But what happened was I could just see as the company grew from, we had one store. The following year we had two. Then we went 7, 10, literally 60, 80, 100 in these 5 years. And it was just a transformation of culture that I saw it happen. And it's sort of almost like happens very slowly, but then all of a sudden, is it, from that very bootstrappy, let's look at everything through the customer point of view. Let's use everything we've got of the resources. We suddenly started attracting people from big companies with great CVs,
As
and
as
they
executives or
yeah, kind of exactly. Because at the beginning, I mean, no one wanted to work for us. It's just, we had no credibility. And then suddenly we were like one of the UK's fastest growing companies. And for me, the shock was how quickly the culture changes and how you sort of a very agile entrepreneurial culture can start putting on like a corporate mask that kind of comes on.
so let's just hang on to that for a little bit. Are you saying that's because or partly because of the people that you brought in at that stage of growth?
Yes, I think you but by definition in a startup you get people who haven't worked in large companies because it's just not worth their while. They've got great CVs. Why would you go? And especially back then, startups weren't as sexy as they are. It might be a bit more attractive now for someone to say I've joined a startup, but at that time it wasn't. So by definition, all everyone had was just a customer point of view. So I mean, that was the North Star of everything we did. And therefore that combined that with having no bureaucracy, everyone being quite clueless, having no money. So you end up, necessity is the mother of invention. Everyone just starts like, you know what I mean, like bootstrapping, making 2 + 2 = 10, doing whatever they can, but always coming into the business
How is
through
how
lots
is
of
that different for you get an executive who comes in from, let's say, Coca-Cola or,
yeah.
rapper. What did they bring in that was and what did they bring in that changed the culture? And also, was that only bad or was there a beneficial aspect to that or not?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting then because I remember when we started attracting people from big companies, and I also like, sort of remember the moment where we got a buyer. I used to choose like what we used to have on the basis of how much I like them, and I do them very quickly and go. I love innocent smoothies had just started. I was like, come on in, I love that. Let's just put it in the store. Let's put it in one store and see how it sells. And then suddenly we started attracting people from these big companies. Like she was the procurement manager or whatever we called her. And suddenly it was like everything is slowed down. Nothing happened. She put the processes in, but because of the processes, it was like, guys, we haven't had anything new coming into the stores, any new innovations. No, no, no. And just I could see how bureaucracy can slowly, by slowing down, it kills innovation, it kills the energy.
So that was
Then we hired, yeah,
the bureaucracy was processes, like, these are the way we have to do things.
yeah. And those ways by definition slow down because people go into silos. They're not human, no one's feeling stuff. And kind of my point is when as soon as you put in it, we actually hired the managing director from a very big company come in and thought, oh, we need someone to put in a few more processes. And I remember the first question I got asked is, great, so what's your title? And I didn't really have a title. I was like, oh, I suppose I'm marketing director. And I remember I'd gone to a store because, as a young team, we used to go to a store every single morning and genuinely get our coffee from there. And I remember calling the new ops director going, that store was filthy. The queue was so long. People were leaving the queue. And, the comments I then got told off by the managing director that I can't do that. I can't just call the ops guy. I have to wait till next Monday's management meeting to bring that up as an agenda item. Now, by the time I have forgotten like how it felt and how bad the customer experience was if I leave it for agenda item. So slowly, it's with these little micro actions, the fire goes off, right? Because then if the fact that I'm having a bad customer experience, I can't feed that and no one's acting on it, I'll stop caring, right? So slowly everything starts shifting towards becoming a very much more corporate culture, based on bureaucracy, based on, everyone thinking they know all the answers. This is how we do things.
Well, did you at that point say, I've got to change this or I've got to leave this?
I didn't know, Dan. So this is like, hands up, guilty as charged. I was very young at that time. It was, no one really talked about entrepreneurial culture and corporate culture. If you remember back then, so this is, we're talking in the late 90s, the thinking was entrepreneurs have a sell by date, that actually the worst an entrepreneur can do is stay on in the company because the thinking was entrepreneurs are great at startups, but all that passion and stuff is really flaky. So the feeling back then was you've actually got to give it, give it to the sort of the grown-ups have got to come in, right? And an entrepreneur can never lead a company because they're just great at that small baby startup phase.
So
And I
what
kind of
so what you is that when you started to think I can't stay here? What was
Yeah, so I started, both my brother and I sort of started feeling very alienated from everything. We used to have something wherever a new store opened, we'd all be there, putting posters up on the walls. And then suddenly these systems started like, they just were sucking the energy out and it didn't feel like the same company. And just the more people we brought in, I remember bringing someone in from Nestle And he was coming in every day with a cup of coffee from Costa Coffee, which is a competitor. And I remember thinking, oh, he must be looking at something that Costa's got, like, right? So after a while, I sort of went to him. After about 10 days, I was like, oh my God, I'm not going to mention his name. I was like, X, tell me what is happening at Costa. Should I come with you? Because you're coming in every day. There must be something fascinating. And he was like, no, Sahar, do you know what? Like, just we've been so busy at the office, just the only coffee I can get, I just get my coffee from Costa. And I was like, when did you last go to one of our stores? And he was like, well, we've been so busy. It's been about 2 weeks. And I was like, you're the new marketing director. You haven't been to a store. And I couldn't quite believe it. And, it was my first experience. There was not much thinking back then of how important this entrepreneurial mindset is. So we were very much, and especially me, I think, as a woman, I've never felt it's been a gender thing, but very much for me, it was like, oh, well done, little girl. You started the company, you brought it to this
Well,
level.
they treated you. They treated, or you imagined or felt them treating you.
It's probably what I felt myself was, oh, my whole passion was really flaky. The fact that I'm a customer isn't a way to run a business, or a business is run on market research and data. Well, the world has changed now, thank God. And every single leader, every single big company is looking for that level of, how can we think more like our customers? How can we not be so driven just by data? How can we use more our instinct? How can we look at it from the outside in? But back then, it was really flaky, the entrepreneurial way. And I literally felt like I had a sort of sell-by date on my head. And my sell-by date was very much like, why am I still there? And I shouldn't be there.
So you and your brother, you at some point you exited. I think it listed, right? You listed coffee.
Yes, yeah, we listed it, and
You were there. You were still there when it listed.
oh gosh, very much so, absolutely. Yeah, we first went on AIM when we had 4 stores. We went on the kind of on the smaller kind of listing on the UK market for the English for the US audience, and then we listed, and but then at this point, the company is, valued at 50 million at that time. We had, lots of cash in the bank, in a very strong position. But we sort of almost, that point was, through that pressure, was, hand it over to professionals to run. So we literally
let the adults.
let the adults come in. Absolutely. And we hired someone, and it should have been a shock. I remember we hired someone from Disney, from a very big company. I remember being quite shocked by him negotiating a salary and the sort of car he wanted. And it was just that way for an entrepreneur. You're so naive. You're like, what? Like, do you know what I mean? This is, but I honestly, because I loved it so much, that thinking was, this is good for the company. And I think as a founder, you generally do what is right for the company.
Whether you like it or not. At what point begin to think with your brother, no, this isn't for us? And how did you manage that transition? And I want to get from there to the interim and then Skinny Candy. But how did you transition out of the company?
The major transition was very much slowly, with these coming in. I'm sort of getting a bit squeezed out. I'm feeling like, what I mean? There's like kind of what I say is just slightly, and kind of you feel like some sort of old dictator of some, do you know what I mean? Like kind of banana republic in a way, still there trying. There was that sort of feeling. And and then I remember it was, we got to 110 stores. So for me, the feeling had gone when I went in. I couldn't feel, and as an entrepreneur, if you can't input, if you feel like, it doesn't matter to what they're doing, the system was so like that. I didn't want to wait. I didn't want to go through management meetings. I wanted to be out there in the stores. I didn't want to spend my whole time in the head office. And since it wasn't needed, then I was told that was the way. That's better for this baby that we brought into the world. And I do believe, you probably know Amar Baide from Harvard. I remember reading his book, The Life Stages of a Business. And he was like, a business does start like a baby, and then it's adolescent. Do you know what I mean? And then it becomes an adult. I remember, like, through his life stages, it was sort of, once a business becomes an adult, you could almost feel like maybe I'm like now the parent of overgrown adult trying to still kind of infantilize it. Maybe I should let it go off.
When you went to the board of directors to say, we want to transition out, I assume that you had a conversation with at least some of the directors. Was the reaction, oh, finally, wow, she finally saw the light, we didn't want to tell her? Or was it, well, we're losing our North Star?
Yeah. Do you know what? They were exactly the first. She's finally cottoned on. We don't need her. She's so unprofessional. She's so flaky. That sort of passion is so flaky. And no one had that insight that people have now. People didn't talk about, being agile and being entrepreneurial and being customer focused back then, right? It was all about
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, it was all about how can we put proper management, proper systems? How can we professionalize this? Not realizing, yeah. Sorry,
Do
go
you
on.
think later on, I don't know exactly when, coffee probably had some serious issues, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Correctly. Do you think that was related to the management culture that was brought in and replaced you, or is that something completely?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it happened exactly. It took 8 years for them to take the company to the ground. We left in 2000, and it was in 2008. I remember I was writing my book, 2009, that I heard on the radio Coffee Republic had got into administration. It was a very competitive market. So, if you haven't got your eye on the outside, what Starbucks is doing, what Cafe Nero is doing, what Costa's doing, you've lost it. So I mean, if you're sitting there internally focused on systems and waiting for the next management meeting and some sort of a very vague customer mystery form, so you feel you've got your eye on the customers, of course, in a very competitive market, you just haven't got a chance. And so Coffee Republic didn't have a chance. And but I blame ourselves for that, which is why I've sort of dedicated just since then to writing about that, kind of how important that startup culture is as you grow.
I have to ask this question because I've seen it happen many times. Is that the very similar story. The new owners sort of run it into the ground. They don't really get the spirit of the company, and the founders or the previous owners say, you know what, I can buy this for a nickel. Let me take it and build it up again because there's still value there. Did that thought ever cross your mind, or you said,
Funny enough, actually, my brother went back at one point. But they'd made such a mess of it. They had made such a mess of it that at that point, it was just far too competitive, and yeah, it was just too late. But incredibly difficult for us to see this. I mean,
oh,
I still
can
find
imagine.
it. Yeah.
I can
I
imagine.
think as a founder, it's so visceral, and huge lessons learned, and I love it now when I speak to big companies about how can we be more startup-y. These sort of billion-dollar startups you have talking about customer obsession, talking about how important it is. And I think it's very much companies have souls, and sometimes people don't realize, and the soul often comes from the founder because it's almost like this lovely holy trinity of the business idea, yes, but the customers and then the people that work in the company, it's all attached together, like as a sort of holy trinity of all three. And people often kind of disclaim that. Do you know what I mean? They minimize this idea that a company has a soul, because once you've been part of it, you know how special that is. And you know how it makes people operate at a completely different level, the level of innovation, the ideas, people bring their heart and soul. But once you kill that soul and trample on it, not realizing, and bring in these professional systems, and treat people like, how could people be possibly awake and switched on working for a professional company when they haven't got the eye on who you're serving on the outside?
And the soul, you're saying, at least for that kind of company, is very much tied up in the relationship with the customer and the customer
Absolutely.
experience. Because you see that I don't know if it's joy or something like joy. Let's fast forward to Skinny Candy, and again, let's skip by the origin story a little bit. I'm really curious. Tell us a little bit about what that was, but in particular, what did you do differently? Now that you're a
Yeah.
second-time entrepreneur, you've
Yeah.
done this before. No one can say, "Oh, you don't know what you're doing," right? So what you
Yeah, no, no. I mean, Skilly Candy was very much something where I then at that point was on the speaker circuit, and I was traveling a lot, and I have a very sweet tooth, and I had just read this book called Sugar Busters about how bad sugar is before, and my mother giving it to me, and I'm thinking I've got to stop eating sugar. No one ever talked about not eating sugar, and so Skinny Candy was my personal. It's always my personal solution to something. But in a way, Dad, I talked about that like almost not at all, because I started it, it was never a love for me. I started it, but I was still heartbroken from
Oh, really?
Czech Republic. Yeah. It was, I think, kind of 2006, 2007, and it was very different. It was a product. I had to sell it through retailers. At that time, you couldn't sell directly to customers as you can now. And so, but when an offer came from a confectionery company to sort of buy it out and grow it, I was like, take it. And so I sold it very early on to Glisson PLC, that was that taken over by Benecol. And of course, as a big company that took it over, the CEO was amazing, and he said, "I can really grow this for you, because to have a brand that is, you sell to retailers like that, slightly FMCG, you need like a big company." And I believe that. And his company got bought out. He left, and so they took that brand to the ground. But now, I mean, what I'm doing with By We're Built, and sort of building this community and this organization and having a team again. What I'm doing currently, Dan, is my chance at all the culture mistakes I made, and making sure that I don't make those mistakes again, and keeping it very startup-y, very bootstrappy, very scrappy always as we grow.
So tell us about your current endeavor.
Yeah, so I mean, I never thought I would do anything again. And in the UK, I sit next to people and go, "Surely, is this it? Are you just going to write books? And is this it?" And I was thinking, yeah, this is it. I don't think I can start anything again. And just the idea came to me in COVID. Do you remember the time in COVID when everyone was like, "Is this kind of pause going to get you to write a best-selling book or sort of something?" And I remember literally this tweet popped up. And having at this stage been in very much the UK entrepreneurial ecosystem, the great thing about the UK is it's like a village, really. We all know each other, so the ecosystem is you can connect the dots very fast. And this tweet popped up, and the tweet was, "Not all of us can invest in women, not all of us can mentor women, but we can all buy from them." And I remember it was so powerful, that, because there's a lot of talk around investing, there's a lot of talk about mentoring, but actually, we forget that customers are the best investors a business can have, right? Everyone's, this whole new generation, everyone's celebrating investment. But actually, to have a really great sustainable business, you need customer demand, right? That's the best place to grow from.
As one of my recent podcasters said, raise money from customers, not capitalists.
Oh my God, I must listen to that, because it's just this whole thinking around, like, sometimes these guys celebrate raising investment, but I'm like, but what about customers? Why are we not celebrating customer? And so this idea that actually a business needs customers, and I knew quite a few women-built businesses, and I thought the problem is we talk about what women haven't got, but why don't we just change it and shine a light to show, look how much they've achieved. And to give you an idea, like, I thought I knew all the brands. I did an Excel spreadsheet of 35 women-built consumer brands is what we're doing. And just now we have 2,500 consumer brands in our community, that, everyone just raising their hands going, I'm a female consumer brand. Can I join? And so we have aisles in supermarkets. We have, we're about to do something. We've done stuff every year with Whole Foods, with Ocado, our biggest supermarket chain, with QVC, of just telling young girls that actually look what women have achieved in the world of entrepreneurship.
Right.
And because we do it through consumer products, it's kind of lights up the imagination.
Visible.
Yeah.
So I think I read somewhere that you saying, or listened to one of your presentations, where you say that women have, I think you said, more of the characteristics that entrepreneurs need to be successful. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I sort of believe that it's just, and again, it goes back to what we were talking when, I was told, I remember the word I was constantly told at Coffee Republic when this board came in and that whole new system was, "Sahar, this is business, it's not personal." Whereas actually the fact that women think it's personal, because at By Women Built, 97% of our founders started from a personal need, right? So it was a product they couldn't find. They were scratching their own itch. And as we very much know, a business idea is only a good idea if it's solving a problem, right? Not because you're in love with it. If you got a problem, most likely other people have got that problem, and if your idea solves the problem. So women start from that angle very often. And it's not like that they want to start a business, and that their obsession with customers, looking at it through the customer point of view is such an asset, really. And that empathy, so I think a lot of the skills that women have that we I was always told that wasn't professional for the workplace are actually incredible skills to be an entrepreneur. So, customer empathy, our resourcefulness as women, the fact that we can do a zillion things at the same time. As an entrepreneur, you have to wear a zillion hats in one go and deal with so much. Even the chattiness, the fact that women are actually great at networking, at sharing, at finding leads. So a lot of those qualities really lend themselves incredibly well to entrepreneurship and in building teams. That vulnerability, the emotional nature, it makes women build teams that are again all connected in with the customer, with a purpose, with everything else.
So do you think that men entrepreneurs would do well to have, let's say, either a woman partner or a woman coach or a woman co-founder to inject some of those qualities into the process?
Exactly. That was just why I'm saying, like, even when I speak to big companies, it's like using a bit that sort of more the feminine brain that we were told is not actually, you know what I mean? That's not what you want to. You're just using a bit more of that, a bit more of looking through the customer's eyes, being the frustrated customer, seeing a bit more personally, right, rather than so kind of business-like and so dry.
So I
Because
want to just
yeah,
understand, today you have, is it consulting firm, is consulting practice, it is a speaking
no.
practice? What is the
Yeah,
form?
no, so
that-
Buy One Built is basically is a consumer movement to shine a light on female entrepreneurship. It's powered by 2,500 founders of brands, and kind of we do it through retail partnerships with all the retailers, to shine a light on how many of their brands are women built. We have partners like Goldman Sachs, Rothschilds, yeah, kind of supporting our community. So, and I've got a team again, right? So, and I am so careful as my team grows now, to just under 10, to just make sure we're not going to get processy. We're always going to be asking stupid questions. We're always going to be scrappy. We're always going to just try things. So just keeping that mindset.
Learning the lesson. So
Yeah.
let's end. We've got to end in a couple of minutes. So let me end with the question. I think I ask almost everybody. I think I can guess the answer to this, but if you were meeting your 25-year-old younger self today, and your 25-year-old younger self was saying, "I've got this great idea. I'm the customer. There's a real need out there." What advice would you give your younger self?
Um, I said my advice would be my motto, which is leap and the net will appear. It's kind of, I really believe in leap and the net will appear. I think too many people have got an idea in their head, but they're sitting there overthinking it, asking people if it's a great idea. This whole idea that people are looking for mentors with a business idea. I'm like, even if you've got a panel of every single top entrepreneur in the whole world, they're still not going to tell you if that's a great business idea. The only way you're going to know is just by taking the leap and starting somewhere and starting small and just doing it.
By the way, I'm surprised, and I have to think about why I'm surprised by how many of the guests on this podcast series say something very similar, like do it sooner, don't wait so long, jump in, as you're saying, take the leap. And I've got to think about why that surprises me a little bit. But be that as it may, we're going to have to come to the end. This is Sahar Hashemi. Thank you very much for sharing your passion and your wisdom and your experience with us. I appreciate it. I'm sure that a lot of listeners out there appreciate it as well.
Thank you, Dan. I absolutely love talking to you.
Great. Well, this is Scale App Podcasts. I'm Dan Eisenberg. You know the drill. Pass this on to your friends if you've enjoyed listening to us, and to Sahar in particular. This is about growing companies, because starting it's like, if I've said many times, it's like having a family. Making the baby, it's hard, but it's easy compared to growing a healthy family, because that's a real sustained effort, and there are a lot of turns and twists on the way. So anyway, scaling up is where the growth happens and where the value is created. So again, thank you all for listening, and we'll hope to have you hear us again soon.